Hello, I'm Gemma and this is Non-Fic Books, and today I have my second video for Women's History Month, and I'm sticking within Women's History Month to books either about wider topics which have particularly affected women throughout the ages or specific women throughout the ages, and this is about Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women. And this is Louisa May Alcott, The Woman Behind Little Women by Harriet Reisen. It's 372 pages long and was published in 2010 by Picador. So it's a relatively small book to get through, but there's quite a lot of information in here. Harriet Reisen is not a professional biographer. She has been a lifelong Louisa May Alcott fan once she got into Little Women as a young child, and has become a screenwriter and has written a documentary / drama, docudrama, whatever they are, about Louisa May Alcott that was aired in the US. I don't know if it's available. I'll see if I can find the title for it and pop it down below in case anyone does have access to it. But she, as I said, she is not a professional biographer. And that is the slight problem with this book. I'll come back to that in a second. Overall, the structure is really good. It's very, very traditional biography. It starts off following Louisa May Alcott's childhood, which is particularly interesting. So a large percentage of the book is about her before she writes Little Women. It's only quite late on in her life, really, that she does write Little Women and really start to become quite such a success and well known under her own name. Her childhood was rather challenging, very difficult. Her father was a transcendentalist and was just basically rather useless. He waffed about philosophizing a lot while the family was starving, and they moved, I think by the time she was 20 they'd moved about 30 times, and had gone from staying at wealthy relatives and living a relative amount of comfort into utter poverty, where they were basically starving and can only just occasionally eat some like bread and maybe an apple if the apples were available. So she had really quite a tough beginning, and her father Bronson thought that children were sort of born perfect and close to God, and it was the world that corrupted them. So he did a lot of experiments, and not like physical experiments, but like mental experiments, and observed the children very closely. Louisa had 3 sisters, and it was mainly her, I think probably because she was quite close in temperament to her father, that her father focused on and would do things like, when she was 3, make sure that there was only enough cake for everyone apart from Louisa at her birthday, to see if she was a good enough person to give up her birthday cake to someone else, which when you're 3, wow, that's quite mean. But it was a very, very weird upbringing. They moved around a lot. They had relatives living with them. They got farmed out to relatives. They then basically joined a commune for a while, or well, Bronson tried to set up a commune, which only eventually fell apart when they tried to separate men and women, and his wife said, "You know what? I have had enough." Fair enough. So it was a very unusual upbringing, and eventually Louisa decided that her talent was either in writing or acting, and she felt very responsible and decided if her mum was working so hard, taking in sewing, nursing if possible, letting in lodgers, then she would try and follow her mum's example rather than her father's, and try and earn some money to be able to support their family. Her dream was to be happy and rich, and to provide a room for her mother that was comfort and warm, so that she didn't have to, by the end of her life, she wanted her to not have to suffer and to not be living in poverty. And so she started writing, and she wrote a lot of articles, short stories, reports. When the Civil War in America started, she went to join up as a nurse in New York. That then she eventually came down, I think it was with typhoid or something of that sort of level, about 6 to 8 weeks in, and had to be taken home. But she then turned that into Hospital Sketches, which was a very, very popular serial, which eventually was then published as a book. And she wrote somewhere around about 100 pulp fiction, crimey mystery, horror, that sort of really trashy, great pulp fiction that was very popular and started to bring in a good but not generous income for quite a long time before she started writing Little Women. And Little Women really was the book that sort of took off and ended up making her, eventually, by the time she'd finished the whole series, making her very comfortable and able to support all of her family. The four sisters, are very much the influence for Little Women, and as is their upbringing. A lot of the things in Little Women, the way they were raised, is similar to the Alcotts, but watered down dramatically. And then the four sisters were similar, and as in the book, one of her sisters dies, which was very sad and influenced where she went with the book a lot. Little Women is a bit... Different places will know Little Women a bit differently. Little Women was published, and the whole series was published originally in 4 parts. There was Little Women, Good Wives, Little Men and Jo's Boys. I think that's the right order. But nowadays, if you pick up a copy of Little Women, you can either be picking up a relatively short book, which will be Little Women on its own, or a longer book that will just still be titled Little Women, but that will include Little Women and Good Wives. That's more common in the US, and because of the popularity of like the hardbound, like the cloth-bound ones that have been imported into the UK, we now are starting to see a lot more of the 2 books in one. But that's where the confusion can often arise with Little Women and the series. So her life was really interesting, and if there was to be a better biography, I would recommend going for that, and I would recommend reading one because her life was fascinating. But I think this biography really fell down because the author loved Louisa May Alcott so much. And I think sometimes being hugely passionate about the person you're writing about doesn't actually put you in the best position to be their biographer, because your interpretations, even if you're trying to counteract them, are quite biased because you have a very strong and sometimes quite emotional attachment to the person you're writing about. And this definitely happened. There was quite a few places where her interpretations were definitely presented as if they were facts, and quite a few times where the way she interpreted things that happened, I felt was definitely biased because of an image she had of Louisa May Alcott, rather than really what the evidence there was suggesting. I don't think this made a massive sort of overall impact to the view you'd have got out of her, but certainly I just got quite a few times I got quite annoyed, and yeah, just it didn't really feel like you were getting a particularly genuine image of Louisa May Alcott. The other thing that I don't particularly like about this book is there isn't a single image in it. And while I am not particularly into illustrations or images, she does discuss the photographs and paintings of Louisa May Alcott, and then she talks about her sister May Alcott, Abigail May Alcott, but known as May Alcott, was quite a successful painter and got some paintings into the salon in Paris. And again, there isn't any of those in here, and they're not particularly well described, and I think that is something that let this book down quite a lot, because I ended up on my phone quite a lot googling to see what she was talking about, because I think that would have made it a more rich experience. And she talks about Orchard House, and as you can actually go to Orchard House, it would have been really good to have some photographs of Orchard House in the rooms that she was talking about. So, and which she must have had, because part of the documentary drama thing that she produced was actually based in Orchard House. So I thought that was a bit of a shame that this book didn't include any illustrations or any photographs at all. Overall, I'd read it if you don't know of another Louisa May Alcott biography, because her life was really interesting. She's a very prickly character, and I really don't think I'd have liked her very much if I met her in real life. But she had a lot of challenges in her life, and she obviously did amazingly well, overcoming all of the difficult childhood and the poverty to become quite such a respected and well-known author. So her life is really interesting, and this book isn't bad, but it's not good either. So if you know of a better one, read that. If you don't, this was still a good introduction to Louisa May Alcott's life, but it could do better. Any questions and comments, leave them down below, and I'll see you in a video soon. Bye!